Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I'm Shelley Pruitt, and my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith and Mr. Ryan Roberts. Hi, guys. How are you today?
Good.
Great.
How are you doing?
Okay, so I'm great. How excited are y'all for tonight? I'm so excited to get into this because, y'all, this is the first time we've had this happen.
Mhm.
We have someone who saw one of our podcasts and was connected to it and reached out to us. And when we gave her the opportunity to come on the show, she said she would. We're going to be talking about the Buffalo Jim episode that we did, his story that was featured on Unsolved Mysteries, Death in a Vegas Motel. And his daughter, Jennifer Barrier, is going to be on with us tonight. And she's going to tell us some of the things that the TV show didn't include, including some new updates. I am so excited about this.
Mhm.
Y'all know me and my true crime. And for some reason, Buffalo Jim has got this special place in my heart. In fact, look at me. I'm tearing up right now thinking about it. Y'all know how connected I got to this story, how much I dug.
Very. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was so involved in it that I was calling you guys every day going, you're not going to believe what I found out.
Yeah.
So are you guys ready? Because I really am very excited to bring her on.
110%.
Yeah.
Let's
Okay.
do this.
Absolutely ready.
So let's bring on Buffalo Jim's daughter, Jennifer Barrier. Hi, Jennifer. How are you today?
I'm excellent. Thank you.
Well, I am so glad to have you on. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I'm going to ask you right off the bat. You saw the podcast we did. Did we do the story justice, or was there something that we got wrong or we left out?
No, you did justice. I really appreciate you guys wanting to highlight my dad. It's an unfortunate situation. It really is a case of injustice.
Mhm.
And so for you guys to stand up and want to speak about him, me and my sisters really, really appreciate it. I mean, it meant a lot to us.
I found this story, and I had lived in Vegas for a short time, and I got enthralled with this. And at the time I was living in Vegas, your dad was going around Vegas. I probably watched Gym Wars at some point on the overnight broadcast. I'm not sure I ever saw Jericho Lil Buff on there, but so I know that you no longer live in the Vegas area. Are you and your sisters, are y'all kind of spread out all over, or have you kind of come back to a central location where you can be close to each other?
Yeah. So after my dad passed away, well, actually, let me go back. Prior to that, my mother and I lived in Seattle. We moved to Seattle in 2001, basically because we needed to get out of Vegas. My dad's feud with Rick Rislow became so intense with our family that my mom just couldn't handle it anymore. And so my mom has sisters in Seattle. That's why we moved to Seattle. And then Jericho eventually went back to live with our dad because he was able to support her. And it was an agreement between my mom and dad to get Jericho to live back with him. But after my dad passed away, my mom and I did move to Vegas. I was on this quest to find out what happened to my dad. I really felt in my heart that my dad was murdered at the time, but I was about 90% sure he was murdered. There was still that 10% doubt that, if he did go to a motel with a woman and died, I just need to walk away. Like, I'm not even going to try to fight something I can't win. And, but I did live in Vegas. I no longer live in Vegas now. I have a family now and moved on, but my sisters do live in Vegas with my mom.
Oh, so your mom decided to stay there, and
Yeah.
So Elise and Jessica and Jericho all still reside in Vegas.
They do.
Wow. Okay.
Well, I'll say that, like, when we covered your dad's story, I fell in love with the character that he was. I mean, he was such a character,
Yeah.
it seemed like. But he actually touched a lot of our listeners and viewers as well, because he has slowly crept up to become one of the top episodes that we've done. And I think that has to do with just how entertaining your dad was. He has such an easy story to tell, and everybody was engrossed in him, his life, and unfortunately what ended up happening to him.
Mhm.
So we've had a lot of people reach out that were like, what do y'all do? Are y'all going further with this? So I'm going to say again, thank you for coming on, because our viewers are going to enjoy this.
Very much.
And on top of that, he's going to be such a genuine person. And I think people really connected with your father.
Yeah. I felt like he lived so many lives. meaning that like he did so much in a life in the 55 years that he lived. I always thought like he was just such a unique person growing up that I still have never met someone like him. I don't know if I ever will. Like he truly was a true character, and it was just his personality. That's who he was, and he didn't care what anyone thought about him. He says, "I'm going to be who I am, and I'm going to live the life I want to live, and I really don't care what anybody thinks," because there's always outward judgment. Societal reasons for people to look a certain way or act a certain way. But my dad never followed any of those norms. He just led the life that he wanted to live. And it was a good life for him.
And it was a life that not only was he was a showman, yes. And he was obviously very smart, but his philanthropy side, that was something that unfortunately you don't see a lot of. Somebody that builds himself up from nothing, and then they don't really worry about who's over here. But he did a lot of philanthropy work, and that is something that actually, you guys, there was a twist in this story that never made it onto the Unsolved Mysteries, and Jennifer had relayed some of that to me. The night that Jim had checked into the hotel, Jennifer, why don't you tell us what you found out about Lisa? Remember, you guys, Lisa is the one who made that phone call, who brought him to that motel.
Yeah. So prior to that, there were letters that led up to my dad's death. Some insider that respected my father so much would send him letters that had very important information on it. And my dad even found those letters to be very accurate. Like he would go back and the information would be there that meetings are taking place at a certain time at this location. My dad would send people to that location and meetings were taking place. So he found those letters to be valid and as kind of like just a guide for him to follow. But the letter he received the day before he died was a letter that said they're using people to get access to your business. They're using a female to get close to you. And that seems like that's what happened. This Lisa woman, I'm not quite sure she knew my dad very long. She, when she was interviewed by the detectives, there were two detectives from the violent crimes unit, which, by the way, I found that to be very odd. It wasn't homicide detectives. Why violent crimes detectives?
Yeah.
And going back, it was violent crimes detectives that would go into the Crazy Horse too when there was conflict. So they had relationships with the Crazy Horse too. So anyway, these violent crimes detectives interviewed Lisa, two-part interview. She told one detective, Buffalo went to the bathroom and I left the room. Then she gets interviewed by another detective in the same room and tells a completely different story. And that story was he was snorting massive amounts of cocaine. He had a seizure. She didn't know what to do. She left the room, doesn't know if she shut the door. And she went back, took a taxi to retrieve her vehicle at a Chevron gas station. Well, that story became the official story about the seizure and him and this and that. But first of all, why would the detectives even believe her? She already gave two different stories. I wouldn't find her to be credible. But they found her latter part of that second story to be credible. So we don't even know if really how long my dad even knew her. But what's really interesting that wasn't talked about in the show is that the detectives found a woman that actually had 20-year history with my dad. They went to her house unannounced, interviewed her, tape recorded an interview with her in her living room. And that interview was and then the very next day they interviewed Lisa. Lisa's statement corroborates with this other woman's statement of knowing my dad for 20 years, going and hanging out with my dad at hotels or motels and doing drugs. But it's just really interesting why the detectives would find somebody that had history with my dad that's unrelated to the case, has nothing to do with my dad's death, interview her only to interview Lisa, the main suspect, and have her statement be the same.
Yeah.
So I'm led to believe that they needed this other woman's testimony to give to Lisa. So Lisa had a story to tell. I don't think Lisa knew my dad very long. She was just paid to get him to that motel.
So they had to invent her backstory for her. They had to invent a history.
But the history, it's interesting because my dad, again, this other woman, like we know who she is. Like we absolutely know who she is. She used to appear on my dad's wrestling shows. Our family knows her. And for them to go to her house, she's unrelated to the case, and interview her, that tells us that they needed They needed her statement to make a story, to make
Yeah.
corroborating stories.
Wow.
I'm gonna say so that you can have
Yeah.
so that you can essentially have two witness, I guess you could say, or the corroboration of one witness with the backstory. That
Yeah.
because without it, I mean, it doesn't hold water.
Mm-mm.
So,
Yeah, unsolved mysteries, like we didn't talk about that, but
Yeah.
you look at that detail and you hear that and you're like, hold on a second, like the detectives had to go that route first in order to get a statement and then interview Lisa. And so it's just definitely, this was completely a cover up.
Oh yeah. The whole thing stinks to high heaven. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You mentioned the person who was sending letters to your father, who was an insider. Did you guys ever figure out who that was?
On one of the letters, it said it was an anonymous Metro officer. On one of the letters, but and this person would like type these letters out in all capital letters.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't really know who it was that wrote these letters to my dad, but they were accurate. And those letters, a lot of those letters, most of them were given to police. I gave them to the detectives. I asked them to look into these letters. They said they would do that. I was told that this case warrants a full investigation, but it wasn't fully investigated. And I felt as though the detectives were stymied by superiors to really investigate, because I was being told one thing and then nothing was happening. Oh, well, I have to ask the higher ups. Ask them what? To investigate? Ask them what do you need to ask them?
Right.
Now, I will tell you, when I went to find the Las Vegas Metro Police Department, Clark County proper police report on this, they didn't necessarily want to give me anything, even though you can request it. They're like, yeah, 6 to 8 months. No. So I went and I tried to find others online, and I did find a copy of one of those letters, which I did read on the podcast. And the interesting thing about that was that was actually posted on a journalist site that I had to go and find.
Wow.
And even then, it's like, that's probably to be out, is because he was smart enough to not just give it to one person, he gave it to several people.
Wow.
And of all of them that I could find, I could only find 2 that were available to be viewed, looked at, or read. So I found that interesting. Do you still have copies of those letters? This always, could they not at this point, if you did still have an original copy, pull DNA from it, fingerprints, is sweat, saliva, anything?
Well, sadly enough, after my dad passed away, I pulled all the original copies from his office and I gave it to the detectives. And I said, please look into this. Like, somebody wrote these letters, because these are all clues to what happened to my dad. They're using a female's used, and all this stuff. And they said that they would look into it. They never gave me back those letters, but I have copies of those letters.
Okay. So they do have the originals, should they choose to test them.
Mm-hmm.
Do they have the original envelopes?
No, but they never, they should have the originals, but I don't know if they do anymore. After my dad passed away, it was about a week later, I went to the police station because I wanted to request like all the reports that my dad put in of the harassment and just negligence and this and that. And when I got there, I asked specifically for these reports regarding my father. I'm the executor of the estate, next of kin. And I was told by a supervisor there aren't any reports. There's nothing in the system.
What?
And what's interesting is that Jerica used to go to the police station with our dad to file reports. I remember talking to my dad on the phone when he was filing reports. And for them to say they didn't have any reports in their system, I knew they were lying to me. I was so frustrated. They gaslighted me in any which way. They just made me think I was crazy. And of course, me at the time, I was 24. I'm just running around. I didn't know what to do. I just need to try to figure out what happened to my dad.
Yeah.
My sisters, I promised my sisters I'll find out. And I told my sisters, don't get involved in this. Don't talk to anyone. If anyone talks to you, let me know who they are. I'm going to try to find out what happened to dad. I'm on this quest. And each night I had to tell them I don't have answers. I don't have answers yet. I went to Metro. They said there's nothing. There's no reports. And then, of course, we kept asking, how could there not be reports? Why are there no reports? We kept making ourselves crazy.
Yeah.
There have been reports. It's just unfortunate.
Well, if I remember correctly from the podcast episode that we did, I mean, it kind of came out to light that, I guess if you want to put it in this terms, that certain people were on a payroll, I guess you could say, quote unquote. So, I mean, obviously that kind of lends into the corroboration that there wouldn't be any reports.
13 judges, a county clerk, the
Make
mayor
it go
had
away.
all had contributions from Rick Rizzolo and his club.
Yeah, make it go away. Yeah.
Oh, and then I would call these officials, like, for example, the mayor, the sheriff, and I would try to get meetings with them. And they would their assistants would say, oh, they're busy for 9 months, or they can't they'll call you back. We'll call you back when we can schedule a meeting. But I was so persistent. I called often. So often that the sheriff's hotline number to his office, like, went to a voicemail box whenever I called from my cell phone. And I knew that that's what was happening. It had to have been, because each time I called, it just went directly into voicemail. So I stopped off at a 7-Eleven and used a payphone to call a sheriff's assistant. And sure enough, it rang through. And then I was able to try to set up a meeting. And then that meeting never happened. It got canceled. But then I found out where the sheriff was going to be one night. He was attending a retirement party at the Orleans Casino. So I said, I'm going to that. So I brought this guy with me named Mike. He used to be an MP in the Air Force, a military police officer. He went with me. And sure enough, Sheriff Gillespie was there. And I walked directly up to him and said, hi, I'm Jennifer, Buffalo Jim's daughter. I've been trying to get a hold of you. Like, not able to get a meeting. Well, you know what? He started beating sweat off his forehead, like, and almost immediately. And then was shaking, and then pulled out his wallet and gave me his business card and said, call me on Monday. And then I was able to get a meeting with him.
Wow.
Oscar Goodman, the mayor at the time, I couldn't get a meeting with him either. And then I saw that there was martinis with the mayor at the Tap House pub on Charleston. So
I love it.
Yeah, I was not giving up. And so I showed up. Mike Gomez went with me. I saw him. He's a very popular mayor, very nice guy. I walked up to him and said, hi, I'm Buffalo Jim's daughter. Oh, hey, your dad was a good guy. And I said, yeah, I know. He said, I gave him the key to the city. And I said, that's great, but he's dead now. Do you know what happened to him? He said, no doubt your dad was set up. And I was like, do you know what happened to him, though? And this is a mob attorney. This guy used to be a mob attorney. He just told me at that time that no doubt your dad was set up.
Wow.
And this is from the man.
Yeah.
From the mayor.
No doubt your dad was set up. I'll never forget that.
Now, so have you spoken to him since? Does he still stand by that statement, or has he recanted or retracted it?
I was able to get a meeting with him after that in his office. And then when I met with him in his office, he just kept telling me how great my dad was and that there's nothing he can do. He's like, he would tell me that, oh, that's not where he was found dead in that Motel 6. That's not my jurisdiction. That's outside the city of Las Vegas. And I said, okay, even if that's outside the city of Las Vegas, why aren't you going to help me? You just told me a week ago, no doubt my dad was set up.
Yeah, and you can get on the sheriff to get off his butt to do what he's supposed to do. So, you know.
Oh, and then I met with the sheriff, and the sheriff's like, Jennifer, my people said there's nothing here. There's nothing here. There's no reason for us to believe that your dad was murdered. And I thought, what do you mean there's nothing here? Why isn't this being investigated? I mean, look at the background, the facts leading up to his death. How can that not be investigated?
I'm telling you now, I have got a quick question for you, because I lived in Las Vegas, that on the Boulder Strip, on Boulder Highway. I know exactly where that hotel sits. How can that not be in Las Vegas proper's jurisdiction? Was it supposed to be at a substation, or what was it?
Yeah, there's unincorporated areas of Vegas, but his whole thing was that he's the mayor of the city of Las Vegas, and that's not his jurisdiction. Doesn't want to help me. But
I hope he wasn't collecting taxes from that area.
Yeah. He just didn't want to help.
I mean, if everybody, including the mayor, can see that it was a setup, it seems like they would dig further into it.
Yeah.
Since you've been digging and when you lived in Vegas, did you ever receive any harassment from someone trying to keep you from digging into this?
I did receive a phone call once, and some guy told me I needed to pipe it down. And then he hung up on me, and and it was like an unknown number. No, I wasn't able to trace back to, and for me to go to police and tell them someone just said this to me and this unknown, they're not going to help me anyway. I mean, I can see why my dad lost hope. My dad lost hope in ever doing anything with the police because they weren't going to help him. And sure enough, they didn't. Even after he passed away, there's enough to investigate. You heard Dr. Larry Sims say, if this guy's being harassed and there's a background, that could be investigated, it should be investigated. There's links that lead up to his death.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And see, that's how, in my opinion, that's how you know you're kind of getting onto something, or you're getting on somebody's nerves, at least, is when you get those, hey, you need to pipe it down, because we ourselves have received some of that with some of the true crime that we've covered on this podcast. You know, I've gotten anonymous calls, and people tell me, hey, stop looking into this. And it's like, no, I'm good. I'm going to continue. You know?
Well, like I said in the show, at the end, I'm glad they used this. But in 1999, my dad and I were up at Mount Charleston. It's a place we went to often. And he had said to me, if anything were to ever happen, would you stand up? And I said, yeah, what does that mean? And I remember him saying, I was just asking. And I thought he meant like old age. Like if he were in an old age home one day, would I be there for him? I thought that's what he meant, because he never really elaborated. But then when he passed away, I started remembering that time with him when he asked that question to me. And even after all these years, it's been 15 years, like I'm still like standing up to try to figure out like if anyone is ever going to help me find out what happened to my dad.
Well, I will tell you that is one of the reasons it was seeing you guys on the Unsolved Mysteries show and seeing your passion and Jerica's passion. And I'm telling you, whenever you guys reach out, I mean, my heart was breaking for you. Like, it's like you were right there in the moment. And the thing that I felt that I found really interesting was when you had said that your dad had said that he wasn't going to let anybody just take anything from him. And he said that to you. Mm-hmm. And so you were aware, kind of, because you didn't actually live there, but you were kind of aware that things were getting really hot, that he was getting, harassed a lot. Did Jerica ever express to you that she was concerned for her safety while she was with her dad?
No, she always felt safe with him, because he never scared us. He never scared her.
Right.
And he always had people around to support her. And I did work for my dad when I was 16, and I saw the harassment. I saw what he went through. I heard the phone calls that would come through. I saw firsthand what he had to battle. I think that's why I still also have a sensitive spot in my heart for my dad, is like, I know the struggles he went through because I saw it. I worked for him one summer, and it was horrible. It was not a good experience. And I asked my dad once if he would just move. I'm like, why don't you just like move to a new location? Why are you enduring all this stress and costs? And because there was so much cost involved. Like the crazy was 2 people would break his air conditioning in the middle of summer. In the middle of the night, they'd go and like break his air conditioning up at the top, on the top of the building. And he'd get there the next morning and it was 120 degrees in his office. And he would have to, of course, like get it repaired. And that costs several thousands of dollars. Mm-hmm. And then they would break it again. And then they would vandalize his customers' vehicles. Eventually, like, customers aren't going to want to go to him.
Right.
When there's jeopardy involved. And it was it was a huge financial burden on him. And then when I asked him why he wouldn't move, he said, Jennifer, I came from nothing. I'm never going to let anyone take anything away from me. And although I admired that about him, I was also like very worried too, because I felt like he should have moved to a new spot, but he was never going to back down to anyone. And he just never was going to.
Well, so from your perspective, having worked for him and stuff like that, and to kind of also refresh like the viewers and listeners that are watching, listening to this, what was the start of it with your dad, with the harassment? Like, what kicked it off?
Yeah, so I worked with my dad in the year 2000, but before that, probably 5 years before, Rick wanted to expand his operation, his Crazy Horse 2 business. So he went to my dad and said, hey, I'll pay you X amount of dollars to move out. But the money wasn't sufficient enough for my dad to get up and move out of that location. Plus, my dad was grandfathered into a lease because the person who previously had owned that building, like, really appreciated my dad, had a lot of respect for him, a hardworking man. And he grandfathered him in because he was worried that maybe that strip club could buy that building and my dad would have to just be kicked out right away. So my dad had like legal basis to stay there, but he was not going to give up his business for pennies. It wasn't worth it to him to move. Yeah. And again, I don't know what that dollar figure was because I don't remember him telling me, but he said it was not worth it. So then Rick got upset and threw his cigarette out on his carpet and then walked out of the door. And then ever since then, the battle began. It was a battle royale. Yeah, it just was. I mean, they would walk by the building, they would flip us off, they would hit the window, they would spit. They spit a lot, spit at the doors. They again just kept doing stuff to piss my dad off.
Were you yourself ever threatened when you worked for your father?
No, but I would say stuff to them. Like I would walk out of the building. I'm like, go back in your own building. This is not your area. This is my dad.
all 16 years old of you, right?
What are they going to do? Shoot me? Like maybe.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I was very upset. Like it made me angry. Working for him made me angry because there was so much stress, and I saw what my dad was going through and the manipulation that was being caused and the harm and the pain, the burden and the financial burden on him. But, not only that, like city officials would send people to his office to try to catch him in some violation. Like city officials, like the city councilmen, they would send people to my dad's office to see if there were oil spills or my dad was out of code just to try to get my dad on a fine. They were doing anything they can to get my dad out of this building. It was just constant battle he was facing.
I did not know that, but we do know that there was a city councilman on that payroll, what we had pulled up and dug into. I know 13 judges, city council, district attorney, county clerk, the mayor. There were 20-something people on that list.
Yeah.
Now this is something that you told me in a message, which you've got to tell us this, because this became a point of contention that we could not figure out. We actually discussed it on the podcast, was we could not figure out how the car moved. And we're like, did they put it on a trailer, go clean it, bring it back? Because his white Rolls Royce that he allegedly took to the motel was not in anyone's view when the police were there. Suddenly, a couple hours later, there's a phone call, hey, we just missed the car. And that parking lot, you would never have missed this white Rolls Royce. And we know that it was acquired in a lien from Bob Stupak, correct?
Yeah. So
tell me about that. How would they be able to move it?
Yeah. So the background of that vehicle is that it was previously owned by Bob Stupak. He's the owner of the Stratosphere Hotel. Apparently had mob ties. Some articles reference that. He brought that vehicle to my dad's auto shop and said he wanted the engine restored with all original Rolls-Royce parts. So of course, my dad, he authorized service, and my dad proceeded on with getting it repaired. And of course, there was a huge cost involved to repair this vehicle in the tens of thousands of dollars, but Bob authorized him to make that service to repair that vehicle. So once the vehicle was completed, my dad called Bob and said, hey, Bob, come on down. Your vehicle's ready. And his response to my dad was, I'm Bob Stupak. Give me back my car. I'm not paying for anything.
Good.
Yeah. And my dad said, I don't care who you are. Like, we repaired your vehicle. And if you're not going to pay, then I'm going to keep it. And he said, you're not keeping it. It's my vehicle. I'm Bob Stupak. Give me back my car. And so my dad was able to gain an artisan lien on that vehicle. And which means that once Bob pays him, he'll release the car to him. But until then, it's my dad's vehicle. And so that's the vehicle my dad was driving that night. Now, let's go back a few months before my dad passed away. My dad was on vacation. And then when he returned from his vacation, that vehicle was missing out of his shop. Well, my dad called Metro, and Metro got their Viper squad involved. And they found the vehicle in Bob Stupak's driveway. They were able to retrieve the vehicle and give it back to my father due to my dad having that artisan lien. Well, that's the vehicle my dad was driving that night. And my thought is, who would have a second set of keys?
Right.
Bob Stupak. Another interesting thing is Bob Stupak's birthday was April 6th, the day my dad was found dead, which is really weird. But I actually called Bob a month after my dad passed away. It was like about a month later. And I was put on hold. I called the Stratosphere, asked for his office. I was on hold for about 15 to 20 minutes, but I waited because I wanted to see if he'd get on the phone. If not, I was going to show up there. So, yeah, I know he goes to work every day. I had heard.
Yeah.
So, he got on the phone and said, Jennifer, what can I do for you? And I said, hey, you know what happened to my dad? what happened to him. And he said, I don't know what happened to your father. Your dad was a good guy. I don't know what you're talking about. I said, listen, who would have had a second set of the keys that night he passed away? You. That was your vehicle, but then it became my dad's. What happened to my dad that night? And he just kept saying he did not know. The conversation was going nowhere. I ended up ending the call. But I went to the detectives, violent crimes detectives, and asked them to investigate him. And they said they would look into it, but they needed to ask the higher ups. They never investigated him. But we know the origin of that vehicle. The origin of that vehicle is that Bob Stupak owned it.
Right.
Bob Stupak had to have been involved. Who else would have had a second set of keys?
And that was something that I found whatever, because we sat here and tried to figure out, but the easiest answer was whenever you buy a car, you get 2 keys. And one would have been left with Buffalo Jim to repair. The car was to get started or whatever. Would the other key be with the owner? And that was something that whenever, brought it up to these guys, they were like, that was like the easiest answer. We didn't even think about that. And that is something that, if nothing else, someone at least got the keys from Bob to move the car. That's the only, because there was no damage to the car as far as we know, correct? Whenever Elise and Jerica had it retrieved back to the house, there was no hot wiring involved, anything like that, because that became a point of question. The car was intact?
Yeah, no hot wiring. So someone had a second set of keys.
Okay.
Yeah,
see, there's a little mystery, guys. We didn't know. Go ahead, Ryan.
Because it was clean as a pin too when you got it back, right? Like everything had been wiped down.
Wiped down. Yeah, you would have seen his hair in that car. He leaves hair everywhere. That car was detailed.
That is fascinating.
And so whenever I talk to law enforcement agents about this particular scenario, they say, how stupid are these detectives? Are they really that stupid? Of course you go back and find out who would have had the second set of keys. Who would have had the second set of keys? Bob Stupak. And I'm like, I know they're real stupid, aren't they? I mean, they're stymied by their superiors. That's why they're not doing anything. It's not stupidity. It's that this is an organized crime that had been done and conducted. These guys allowed this to happen, meaning allowed this cover up to occur. These guys aren't stupid.
Yeah.
They know what they're doing. And they covered it up.
And all of that stemming from basically money and parking spaces, which seems to be such I'm not even sure the word, inconsequential reason for dying. It's like parking spaces and money. People, I don't know. Go ahead, Brian.
Do you think that there are some that actually do want to help and are stymied, like you said, or do you think everyone just kind of wants to wash their hands of it and not deal with it?
I think there's a mix of both. There are people that are just baffled and they want to help. Even now, I mean, I know Metro officers that believe there is so much injustice done and they want to help, but they don't have authority to help. They don't have authority. But there are others that I think it was a tight-knit group of people in Metro that covered this up. They all place blame on each other. Well, I can't do anything. I need to ask the higher up. And then I go ask the higher up. I can't do anything. The detective's saying I don't need to do anything here. There's nothing here. Go ask the coroner. Then I go to the coroner's office. The coroner says, there's no investigation. Metro's telling me not to do anything. I go back and I'm like, why'd you tell Metro not to do, or coroner not to look into this? We don't have an investigation. Go back to the coroner. They kept ping-ponging me around and blaming each other, that I was just like, I was going down a rabbit hole.
Yeah. So is it from back then, whenever you were, I guess, being ping-ponged around and running your tail off, so to speak, has it shifted that, like with you still digging into things? I mean, has the higher up, I guess, landscape shifted? Have people left, and stuff like that? Are you starting to kind of break through a little bit more?
A few people have left. There are still some that work for the department. I just don't know. Like, I have contacted the FBI a few times since the show launched or aired. I always say launched, and they haven't gotten back to me. So, and I tell them I have additional information for them. I want to talk to them about this woman that was interviewed before Lisa for corroborating statements. Like, that needs to be justified. Why would they need to interview her first? That's like key to understanding that this has to have been a cover up. Another thing, my dad was granted and awarded a $1 million lawsuit, and it was supposed to have been given to him. He was supposed to receive payment after Rick was released from house arrest. That's another reason to kill my dad. He's going to get his $1 million.
Right.
They can probably kill him for a lot cheaper amounts. So Rick never had to give that $1 million to our family.
Oh, I did not realize that was due upon release. I thought that the settlement had been granted and he had to pay it. Now I know that he had claimed indigence and that he was broke and that he was shuffling his money around to appear he could not pay his fines. I didn't realize, or perhaps I never found that was due once he was completed his house arrest. So the other thing that you had mentioned that I found interesting was not only we know that Jim was a philanthropist, we know that he helped out a lot of people. You had mentioned to me that he was also helping to relocate prostitutes and get them out of the situations that they were in, and that potentially Lisa might have been someone who had come to him under the guise of, I need help getting out. Can you expand on that a little bit?
So we never really knew this until recently, but my dad was assisting an organization called Prostitutes Anonymous, and he would rescue women. And when I spoke to the founder of that organization, I asked her, well, what would he do to rescue these women? And she said he would pick them up and take them to a hotel or motel and get them that hotel or motel room, not in their name, in his name. So they have a safe haven for the evening, and they were able to get out of a bad situation. Or he would even purchase plane tickets for them to go home. So it makes sense to me that silver phone that was in feature or shown in that picture on the episode, we never received that phone, nor did we know our dad having that phone. So I'm just wondering, could that have been the phone my dad used to help women? And maybe Lisa was one of those women that said she really needed help. And my dad went out and believed her and was going to get her that motel room, which explains why my dad went in to get the motel room for her and didn't just give her the money to do it herself.
Went in alone. Right.
She was going with
and
him.
That to me, knowing that part now, that makes a lot of sense as to why he would walk into the lobby alone. Why, whenever he walked out in that footage, that you see somebody come right up behind him, following him, because we don't know if they're a man or a woman, but somebody is a little too close as he exits the lobby of the motel. And maybe perhaps that was something, he was scared. He was like, come on, let's go. Let's get you in the room. That makes a lot of sense to me. That's how he could have been relatively easily lured out, even though he was warned that they're going to use a female to get into your business and to get close to you. But if somebody called and said, help me, wow.
Yeah.
He wouldn't have turned that down. Or I think he would have, based on everything I've learned and I know about him. I don't think he would have turned them down no matter what. He'd have been like, yeah, I've got you. Come on.
Yeah.
And he also told Jerica that he would be back. And
right.
I really believe that that's what he was going to do. He was going to make sure she had a place for the evening, and he was going to be back. He was going to return home.
Were you ever able to track this woman down and talk to her, Lisa, directly?
I was not, but the Unsolved Mysteries show reached out to her, and she said that she was going to let the detectives know that they're contacting her and that and she's not participating at all. Also, a Channel 8 News reached out to her, and she said, don't ever call me again. She just doesn't speak up about anything. And again, it's just so odd, because if she really was my dad's friend and she feels bad for what happened to him, then why isn't she speaking to anyone about this? Why isn't she being genuine about this situation? It's more like she's on defense. I don't know him. Oh, I have nothing to do with this. Please don't mention my name. I'm not participating. It just seems like it was a job that was done, and she participated in this transaction, and it's been long over, and she doesn't want to do anything further. So that's what it seems like. I will tell you guys about this forensic pathologist. When I received the toxicology report from the coroner's office, I saw the doctor's name that ran the toxicology. And I thought, oh, let me call that guy and see if he'll give me some information, because he ran the toxicology. He knows the blood samples, the urine samples, and what that would entail and mean. And so I called the diagnostics place and was transferred to him, and he spoke to me on the phone. And he said, Jennifer, come to my office tomorrow at 9 a.m. So I went. He started welling up in tears. He told me he had a big family. He didn't want anything to happen to him. And he said, if you subpoena me, I will talk. Now, why would a PhD forensic pathologist say that to me if he doesn't have answers?
Right.
He wouldn't have said that to me unless he had answers. So I went back to the coroner's office and demanded that the coroner talk to me that minute. And he did. And he goes, what do you want? And I said, I want to tell you that you guys are all lying to me. This was a complete cover up. I know something happened to my dad because I just met with the forensic pathologist and he said he wants to be subpoenaed. Then he started reprimanding me. Why are you talking to our clients? You are not supposed to go around us and meet with these people. You don't have authorization to do that. He was not supposed to talk to you. I don't know why he would have said he needed to be subpoenaed. He doesn't need to be subpoenaed. He was so combative and just aggressive with me that it just he was livid. And I left there thinking, yeah, I got to figure out how to subpoena this guy now.
Yeah.
And then I started talking to attorneys and people were saying, oh my gosh, Jennifer, I don't know where to go with this case. Talk to this attorney, talk to that. I couldn't get any attorneys to want to take this on. I just didn't know who to talk to or I just didn't know the right people at the time. Because remember, I didn't live in Vegas anymore. My dad was away. Now I'm in Vegas trying to figure everything out. Long story short, a few weeks later, I get called in to the coroner's office and I brought Jessica with me. We're sitting in a room with the coroner, his assistant, and a whole bunch of other like Metro people. And sure enough, a door opens. It was like a scene from a movie. And Dr. Evans comes in the room. And I'm looking at him. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's going to tell me he's not going to be able to be subpoenaed. He's going to tell me he doesn't want to be subpoenaed. He's not going to help us. And he had said to me, Jennifer, you know what? When I met with you a couple of weeks ago, I said I needed to be subpoenaed and I'll talk, but I don't need to be subpoenaed. There's nothing here. And I just got up and left. Wow. I never went back to the corners ever since. So
what?
Yep.
Whoa.
So
you're on the right path.
Oh, yeah, it was a complete cover-up. I know it was. Yeah. People are like, and I don't blame Dr. Evans for not wanting to talk. I don't blame him for saying, oh, I made a mistake in saying that, because he probably was threatened. Somebody probably said to him, hey, listen, you're going to follow in our lead. You were never supposed to talk to her. You're going to go back and tell her you made a mistake. So we're going to have this meeting, and that's what you're going to do. And so him being the quiet person he is, just trying to do the right thing, now needs to tell me he's sorry and that he doesn't need to be subpoenaed, which then stops me from ever going anywhere with this.
It's like
yeah.
It's like they called a freaking meeting between the manager, the employee, and HR was present. Like that. And I'm sorry, but not authorized to go. This is your damn dad. They can kiss an ass.
In all honesty, this is what I believe. They never expected us to get this far. They saw us as these like little girls, like, and those kids aren't going to get anywhere. They're not going to get anywhere. They don't know what to do.
I just want to
behind the scenes, making calls, meeting with people, I'm getting answers, only to be like stymied in my own effort to get anything done.
So I just want to tell you how much I admire your tenacity and your drive to get this solved. And, it is so, it's so inspiring to see how hard you're working to get this solved. I really hope something else comes about this and you guys can get this figured out and taken care of.
Mm-hmm. I'm amazed at the fact that you were yelled at for asking a question and they said that he doesn't have authorization to talk to you. That blows my mind. And then he comes back and he says, I don't have to be subpoenaed because there's nothing here. Yeah. Now, for me, that would make me want to put my claws in and go, I'm going to chunk dirt and keep digging until somebody tells me the truth. I do have another question. Did you ever get the exhumation? I know at the time that the exhumation for the hair sample testing, that you were declined. Have you gone back and tried that again to get an exhumation again?
we're looking at the process to doing like a post-mortem autopsy.
Mhm.
Our attorney Gus Flangus is currently looking into that process. But we tried getting that hair sample from the beginning. I had asked the detective 3 times before my dad was buried to take a hair sample, and he said he was going to do it. And then once we buried him a few weeks or so later, I followed up to see what the result of that hair sample was, because I know my dad wasn't a drug user. And at that time, he wasn't a drug user for many years at the time. And the hair sample would have proved that to be true. But I went back, and the detective blamed the coroner's office and said the coroner didn't find any reason to take the hair sample. Then when I went to the coroner, he blamed the detectives and said the detectives said that there's no investigation, so we didn't need the hair sample. So again, blaming each other back and forth. And I was just so angry, again, very upset that I was lied to.
Yeah.
I mean, I would have clipped my dad's hair at the funeral if I would have known they weren't going to take the hair sample.
Right.
Well, see, and this is something that I thought of too. In that house, and at the moment, I'm sure nobody thought to do it. He had a brush, a comb, something. If he trimmed any part of this part of his face with any kind of an electric razor, there would be hair trimmings in that. At the time, did anyone think to grab those? Or
we were all in a scramble. We were
Yeah.
we were all just very hurt over what happened. We were trying to figure out what to do with our dad's house, his business, because I kept his business going. I wanted to make sure that the cars that were there got finished. And we weren't taking on new customers, but I wanted to make sure, like, people weren't upset with the service that they got from received from my dad's shop. So I was trying to run my dad's business, and also my dad didn't have a will, so everything had to go through probate, and that's another issue. And so there was a whole bunch of turmoil going on. Just trying to figure out what we're going to do with our dad's stuff. What's the value of this stuff? We didn't know my dad was a collector of many things. So it was just weird. People kept coming to my dad's office saying they were going to help us, and they weren't really trying to help us at all. I mean, there were a few people that were helpful, but it was more like people were just trying to figure out what my dad had. So yeah, it was really a weird situation. I was talking to my mom on another note. I was talking to my mom yesterday, and I was telling her that, like, after all these years, like, it's very upsetting what happened, but not just that, like, I feel like what I've done in standing up it's not just because he was my dad. That's not the reason why I do this. It's because I don't want this to happen to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm still speaking about my father. Like, my dad was amazing. We can't bring him back. And it's not because of only him. I just don't want this treatment that was done to me done to others, because it's a very horrible treatment to go through. And and officers, when they become police officers, they swear to serve and protect people. And they didn't serve us right. And they certainly didn't protect us. And there's someone out there that got away with murdering my dad, or multiple people maybe. And they probably have done this to other people too. Because someone getting away with this wasn't the first time that they did this.
This is a multi-layered.
Yeah. I mean, it would not have gone off as well, I guess you could say. I hate to put it that way, if it had been the first time. I would agree with you on that.
This is a well-oiled machine.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had actually talked about this because after we did the podcast over your dad, we got off the phone, and we probably had another hour and a half conversation about him, about I wonder about this, I wonder about that, I wonder about that. And we were, the 7 missing minutes. There's a big sticking point for me, is that 7 missing minutes. A guest card accesses room 105 at the Motel 6 7 minutes before he checks in, where he is in his keys. And the only thing I can think of, because when I worked in Vegas, sometimes we would have a phone call that say, I would like this delivered to the room for the guest when they arrive. And you would take a key card, but that would be a manager card, and you would go and place it in the room for the guest, or the housekeeping staff would go and place it in the room for the guest. So I could see how it might be accessed, but I cannot explain how it was accessed with a guest key card. And after it was accessed by him, it was never used. That a key card was never used again until housekeeping put their key card in. That door was never accessed by another guest key card. And that was the only thing I said, I can figure out how there's a register. I can't figure out why guest card. And have they, and I know that the Vegas Metro has said that they don't even make any attempt to explain these 7 missing minutes. Have you had any contact with any of them to maybe try to figure out why that room was accessed? Any explanation at all?
Okay, so we actually didn't learn about this key access log until the year 2020, so 3 years ago, when we requested the investigative files from Metro. That's when I was looking through the files and saw that there's this log, and I was like, hey, let's look at the timing of the log to see when, he checked in. When did he swipe that card to access that room? And I noticed it was 7 minutes before he even arrived. Well, the detectives in the beginning never told me about this key access log or anything about it, or that they were looking into it and that there's any discrepancy whatsoever. That was never brought up to me. It was only 3 years ago when I found this out. Well, but what's interesting, and I see your point here, it's interesting that it was accessed at that time, but never accessed again. I can tell you this, that when he got there, and then my rationale for this is that he got there at the time he did, because even like the credit card receipt and the camera match up in time. It says 8:22. If those match up, why doesn't the key card match up? And since it doesn't match up, why wouldn't the detectives justify the information that's discrepancy in information? Why wouldn't they research that and justify that in their findings? Anyway, but it was interesting to me that the credit card receipt and the surveillance video match up, but the key doesn't. But so my dad, this is what I think possibly would have happened. So someone did access the room. While he was walking to a room, someone opened that room, because if you open from the inside, you don't have to log that you're accessing the room. Someone could have rented that whole entire 6-7 rooms down below that a couple days prior and just had access to all of those rooms. My dad walking to his room could have gotten pulled into one room, or the room that he had booked, which is room 105. And then that's why we actually don't see a key log. It's possible he was pulled into that room. Someone opened the door. And maybe that's why. That's because why would the credit card receipt and the surveillance video match up?
Right. That was kind of our sticking point. That was our sticking point. We could not figure that out. That the 7 missing minutes just do not make sense to us. And that to me, number one, that is the number one out of everything. That 7 minutes.
If you were on the case investigating this, wouldn't you want to know how that could have happened?
That would be number one.
Yeah.
Before I looked at anything else, why is there a 7-minute differential?
There's no notes that explain that. There are no notes.
So it wasn't even investigated at all. Like even the first step, it was just, there's a discrepancy.
There's
Put
a
it in the file.
discrepancy. Oh, well, but the room was accessed. There's a discrepancy. Oh, let's see what time the guy got there. Oh, 8:22. Oh, his room was accessed at 8:15. They never questioned or thought to think, how could that have happened?
And that's the answer.
Maybe somebody pulled him into this room.
Well, that's your answer to mystery. And why that is not the focus of, let me rephrase, why it was not investigated, because I was going to say that's the focus of your investigation. Like we said on the podcast, what investigation? They didn't investigate anything. Your answer is in that 7 minutes.
Yeah.
And my appeal would be anybody that was in Las Vegas at that time that might have been there, think somebody out there knows something. They saw something. They may not even realize they did. I want to see this solved for you. I really do. I have such an affinity. I loved everything I found out about your dad. I got a personal investment in him. I think about, I look for things on this case weekly. It'll just pop into my head. I go, let's go see if anything new's popped up.
Yeah.
Is there anything that our listeners, viewers could do to help? Is there a petition we could sign? Is there anything that we could do to help get this case reopened?
Yeah, well, I can give you guys a phone number to Metro to try calling them and seeing if they're, to try to put some heat on the case. They'll probably just tell you, the case is closed. We're not going to do anything. But the more calls, the better.
Okay.
Yeah, so that can help. Oh, another thing I wanted to mention about the access and this and that. I thought it would be a great idea to pull the camera footage from that major street light next to the motel, because that's a street right there. And I noticed there were cameras there. So I asked the detective if he would pull the footage from that night and into the morning, all the way like that 24 hours of footage, so we can review the footage. Well, he said he would ask the higher ups, and then he let me know a couple of days later that the cameras weren't working that night.
Conveniently.
Conveniently.
This is
Yeah.
Las Vegas. There is a camera every 3 feet,
Every-
all the way back to then. I was
The
there.
cameras weren't working that night.
Yes, I was there in the late 90s, early 2000s as well. And I'm going to tell you, you couldn't go 3 feet. The grocery stores had cameras on you, and that was really kind of before the grocery stores went, "Hey, let's get on this camera thing." There were surveillance cameras in laundromats, especially if they had slot machines in them. You cannot tell me that there is not another angle of that building somewhere. It didn't have to be the street light. There had to be an ATM that might have had a wire view. There's got to be something. There has to be something. Security cameras on homes or anything around there. I do not believe that the one source that you've brought up for them to check wasn't working. Well, have you looked at anything else? This is Vegas.
Yeah. Well, and you know, the detectives did the bare minimum work. They actually did interview a security guard, but he was on duty after my dad checked in. They never interviewed the security guard that was on duty when my dad checked in.
I mean, every twist and turn that you bring forth is just, I mean, it just stinks. Like I said, everything just stinks to high heaven. Everything is so convenient that, this camera doesn't have footage, or
Right.
you know, we didn't interview this guy because it's just, man, everything is just
Well,
wrong.
and you know, another thing that struck a chord is Dr. Larry Sims placed the time of his death between 7 and 9 p.m. that night.
And he say that with confidence.
Mhm.
Yeah, he said it with confidence. 7 to 9 p.m. is when he died. Well, he checked in at 8:22. Someone's out to kill someone, they're going to do it quickly.
Yeah.
That's right.
By
He was a
9.
big man.
And so Lisa's statement doesn't even make sense then if they were partying in that room all night. That's what she said. That they were like in the room for a long time, and he was snorting mass amounts of cocaine, had a seizure, left the room. Well, that doesn't even make sense, because how did he die so quickly then? So
There wasn't time.
there exactly. So this forensic pathologist knows something. The one that wants to be subpoenaed. Really, what needs to happen is the FBI needs to talk to him. They need to go back and say, "Hey, what do you remember about this case?" And you mentioned to the daughter that you wanted to be subpoenaed. What do you remember? What do you remember happened here? And who talked to you after the fact? Because you were invited back to the coroner's office to tell the daughter that there's nothing here. So tell me, like, what happened here? Who spoke to you about this? That's what needs to happen. The FBI needs to stick their nose in this, because, like, again, this is going to happen to someone else.
Right.
It happened to me. It happened to my family. It's going to happen, and it is happening. Probably already happened to other people.
Right.
But they just never had a daughter continue to be so persistent that I just don't want to give up. I mean, I look at all these red flags. There's red flags everywhere in this case. It's just, are detectives so inept? No, they're not. They're smart, bright guys. They're just stymied by superiors to do anything. That's why they would say to me, "Let me ask the higher ups."
It's like they're either extremely incompetent, or you're being completely and absolutely stonewalled at every turn.
Well, I'm being stonewalled. They're not incompetent.
Yeah.
I know they're not. I knew it from the beginning, and I knew they were playing with me. There was also a guy that was a sergeant from the domestic violence unit that was that was responsible to make sure he oversees this case. And I would speak to him often on the phone. I don't know what he looks like. I never met with him in person, but he would call me and yell at me all the time. He told me once to take his job. He said, "Maybe you should take my job then." And he would just get so mad because I would tell him things like, "Hey, I just spoke to this person. I spoke to that person. This person needs to be investigated. That person needs to be investigated." And he was the bad cop. He would yell at me. And then the good cops were those two detectives from the violent crimes unit. And those guys were like, "Oh, don't worry. We're getting it handled. This warrants a full investigation. We're going to take care of this. We're going to get justice for you and your sisters. We're going to make sure we know what happened here. You'll get a full report." Well, no, you're just lying to me. You're just lying to me. You're lying to me. And then you have the detective sergeant guy calling me, yelling at me. Good cop, bad cop. They were playing good cop, bad cop with me all along, trying to mess with me.
Yeah, they were the good cops going to placate you and quiet you down and, okay, little lady, we've got this, move on, which that infuriates me. I would think that as if I'm looking into something, I will take a piece of information. This, oh, you got another piece, give me that too. Let me see if that makes my job easier.
Yeah.
So
I used to tell law enforcement agents, I would say stuff like, was this your dad? And of course they'd say no. And I said, but this was mine. And if this happened to your dad, wouldn't you want it to be investigated? And they said, yes. I go, me too. This is why I'm here today. I want to know what happened to my dad. And I see there's too many red flags. There are too many unanswered questions. There are things that have been promised to me that were never delivered. And I want you guys to act on this, because your job is to serve and protect the community. And you're not protecting a community that doesn't have trust in you. But I mean, 15 years later, I'm still standing, and we'll see if this ever gets anywhere. But I really think it's going to need to be the FBI that takes this, because they're the ones who oversee Metro.
Right.
And if they really want to stop organized corruption within police departments, they need to start with this.
Well, Jennifer, I want to tell you, we have greatly appreciated having you on, but I'm going to ask you to do one thing for me. Tell me your favorite memory of your dad, because this wild, crazy man, we can't end it on anything sad. Can you tell me your favorite memory of your dad?
Yeah, so one of my favorite memories were several times we went to Disneyland often. It was a place we loved to go. My dad was a big kid at heart. He loved adventure, and he loved seeing his kids have fun. And he never rode on those rides, but he would go on this ride. It's the biggest of them all. Direct us, and we just followed him around. It was funny. And he was I would say our Disneyland or Knott's Berry Farm trips were probably my most memorable times with him, just because he would come to life. He was a big kid. He gave us whatever we wanted then. He would dress us up as Disney characters, and he thought it was fun because he just thought it was a great time, and we did too. So those were memories I definitely will never forget. And also all the times my dad said "I love you" to me. He was obsessed with saying "I love you," and I miss it now. I used to get so annoyed back then. All the times he said he loved me, 13, 14, 27, 30. One time it was about 35 times that day. So many times excessively. And I'm like, Dad, I know you love me. Why do you say it so much? Because I love you. And he would say it so much. And now I look back and I really, really miss that. And I miss getting upset that he used to say it.
Yeah.
God, Dad, I heard you. Stop. Yeah.
But I don't miss it now, because I wish I had it.
Yeah.
I wish I had him telling me that.
Yeah.
Because he meant it.
Yeah, I'm very glad that we are left with this picture of this great big kid running around dressing his daughters up as Disney characters.
Right.
That's kind of the memory I want to hold. And Blake, before we sign off here, why don't you tell them everything they need to know? And Jennifer, if you'd stay around with us till after the credits roll, we'd like to thank you properly.
I'm actually not going to do anything for our podcast, because we wanted to make this all about Buffalo Jim and the kind of return to his story and stuff like that. So if you know anything, see anything, and want to help seek justice for Jennifer and her sisters in Buffalo Jim's case, if you don't want to go straight to the source, you can email us. That is the ebppod@gmail.com. We have no problem sending it off on your behalf. We will get with Jennifer and get that phone number from her so that we can put a little bit of heat on this case possibly and see if we can't get this reopened. So,
and if you have any more information, you can go to unsolved.com, unsolvedmysteries.com, and you can be anonymous. You can leave any tips you have. This is kind of a little personal mission of mine to help get this solved. I have fallen in love with this larger than life character, and I definitely want to see this solved. So for Jessica and Elise and Jennifer and Jerica to find out the truth about their dad. So thank you for joining us on Everything Vaguely Paranormal. I'm Shelley Pruitt, my partners in the paranormal, Mr. Blake Smith, Mr. Ryan Roberts. Thank you to our producer, Green Room, pushing the buttons and making us look good. And of course, to Jennifer Barrier, our very special guest. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm getting emotional for sharing your story about your dad. We really appreciate your time. And as always, we will see you next Tuesday. Bye, you guys.